great activity.
Yeah, surprise, surprise. DUBOV sacrificing another pawn temporarily.
Yeah.
One pawn down.
But don't touch it.
Offering another. Yeah, this one is poisoned. Let's show this on the analysis board. Magnus can actually grab another pawn if he wants. DUBOV attacking the white queen. This pawn can be captured. White can play queen takes pawn. And at first it looks like, oh, free pawn. 2 pawns up now for white, but black's rook will come across. I think you should use this rook. If you use the other rook, maybe white can just play queen takes pawn and continue being greedy. Magnus takes it, Jovanka.
No,
he doesn't follow your advice.
This one was no touch. This one came with a warning because, you know, it wasn't that rook that I was worried about attacking the queen. It was the other rook.
This rook?
Yes.
But what happens if I get greedy on
No, not that rook. And keep my rook defending the pawn. The other rook.
That's the rook I was saying.
Oh, that's what you're rooking. That's the one. That's the one. Yeah.
Okay, and now, DUBOV's played it, and now once the queen moves, as it has done, now DUBOV has the option to just take this pawn, and suddenly black's rook is super active. It doesn't look like a good trade for white. He's just allowed the opponent's rook to get into his position, and now, this is the position on the board. Now, surely Magnus, now is the time. Don't forget, he does castle. He does finally find safety for his king. The king not entirely safe. There's only 2 pawns in front of it rather than the usual 3. But right now, Magnus, at least his king isn't going to get trapped in the center of the board.
Yeah, but I must admit, I feel that Magnus has lost control. And once again, everything that we've confidently said is not going to happen has happened.
Probably, it's the commentator's
curse, right?
Commentator's curse. Probably Magnus knows. He's thinking, we know David and Jovanka's style. They're going to be chickens. They're going to retreat the queen. But he's like, no, I'm going to prove them wrong.
Yeah, but just, I don't know, look who benefited from that. You know, suddenly the black rook wasn't doing anything, apart from, it wasn't really doing anything.
Yep.
And now it's there on the second rank, the dream rank for that rook. And look at white's pawns. Look at the structure. It ain't that impressive, if you ask me.
White's a pawn up, but no passed pawns at least.
Exactly.
Vulnerable pawns.
And it's white's king that I'm slightly concerned is a bit vulnerable. In the long run, there's an open line next to it, but also that there's no kind of close connection between the queen and the king. So those kind of factors make me think, I don't really like Magnus's choices.
Don't approve. Yeah, and Magnus right now, he would love a queen trade, the black bishop, and there's a bit of tension right now. The queen's kind of looking at each other, but intercepted right now by the black bishop. So I wouldn't move the black bishop. I don't want to allow Magnus to take those queens off. I just want to move the black queen out of that tension. Just maybe bring her across one square, eye up an undefended white pawn in the middle of the board. I agree. I don't see any.
Can you invite some tactical complications and just go bishop? Move the bishop. I know you said you didn't want to move the bishop.
If there's concrete reasons, if there's specific...
There's a specific reason. And this is the only reason I'm suggesting this, because I saw a mate.
Ooh, you saw checkmate. So you want to bring your bishop to this square, attacking this pawn?
No. Attacking the knight.
Attacking the knight?
Yes.
Okay, wow. Okay, I guess let's trade the queens. Let's take them off.
It didn't even work.
Okay.
It didn't even work. I interrupted the dialogue and it didn't even work.
I thought you wanted to maybe trade these rooks, and the checkmate you were going to show is that if bishop takes knight now, a trade you want to make, then suddenly there's a back rank checkmate. Black's king is trapped.
Say that was the mate that I saw, yeah.
Okay, you saw a different one, but
I saw a different one.
That one
it doesn't even work.
Okay, so right now the move I would play is not to move this bishop. Yeah. Sorry, it's actually I don't want to allow this trade of queens. So instead I would just move out of the way for black.
Totally.
And just eye up this undefended pawn.
I totally agree with that scenario. I mean, that's exactly what you need to do. And also, if black wants to get really fruity, maybe they can start advancing pawns on the right. Because their king doesn't have too much protection.
Yeah, and DUBOV slightly frowning there. Maybe he's just trying to find a way to sacrifice another pawn. He sacrificed a couple already in this game. He's only 1 pawn down for now, but it's not an impressive pawn for white at all. White's rook's extremely passive right now. So DUBOV, he's just looking for a way to kind of seize that initiative and force Magnus back onto the back foot. Magnus looks quite calm, quite chilled, but I agree, Jovanka. I think there were better options for white earlier on that didn't allow any activity.
The bar is saying 0.0. I mean, it doesn't feel like a 0.0 game.
And it's not a 0.0 game. There's so many possibilities, there is the possibility of the white king coming under fire. There's also the possibility that Magnus has full control and he will just emerge into an endgame, a pawn up. And both those situations would be deep trouble for either black or for white. And so many things to play for, but the computer sees everything, and computer condemns us all to this 0.00 play.
That just means with best play, with perfect play, by both sides, it would be a draw. But I think here I would look at, if I were analysing this opening or this position, I would say, okay, 0.0 means actually equal chances for both sides. White has his fair share of chances, black has his fair share of chances as well. And has DUBOV sacrificed another pawn?
It looks like it, right? What's to stop white from playing knight takes pawn?
Yeah, DUBOV.
Maybe there's no.
I mean, I'm trying to work it out as well. DUBOV, he just in his style has offered Magnus a chance, I think, just to win the game. Magnus winning a pawn now. Now Magnus 2 pawns up. What is DUBOV's idea? The problem is, for black, if you take that knight, then suddenly your bishop would be under attack. But the black retreating, white can just move the queen back, defend your knight, 2 pawns up.
Exactly. But you have to be slightly careful where you put your queen. You do have to put it in one square to defend the knight.
Put it on the central square.
Exactly. But it is straightforward.
And there we see Stockfish does say there's only one move for white. It happens to be the most natural move, but you cannot defend the knight from the side. I'm wondering why Magnus is thinking. Because only one move saves your knight right now. He does find the best move.
And DUBOV playing instantly. The bishop moves to the edge.
Do you think this was a pawn sacrifice or a pawn blunder this time? Because
with
that
DUBOV,
was your key pawn, your central pawn. But not only has he lost a pawn, but his rook, which was in the heart of white's position on the second row,
is now back. It's now gone back,
to a bad square.
And there's no coordination between the white pieces. I mean, with most people, I would say, it was a blunder.
Yeah.
With DUBOV, who knows?
I think it was a blunder.
Okay.
I don't want to say 100% because we've said 100% in the past and it's been wrong, but I would say 99% sure that was a blunder because it wasn't an obvious 100, it wasn't a clear cut pawn win. White had to take a pawn, distracting the black queen in order to take the black bishop, but it's only a 2-move tactic. It's the type of thing he should see, and is he slightly shaking his head there? I don't know if I'm imagining that, but now there's just no compensation for those 2 pawns. All white needs to do is just kind of protect everything, make sure his knight finds a safe square. I think he's completely, I think Magnus is completely in control if he finds the right moves.
Totally, and whilst we're waiting for Magnus to come up with a plan just to control the play, well, we do have a quiz of the day where we're asking who do you think is the most inspirational woman in history and why, and some answers again. So Philippe's grandmother says Elizabeth Cady Stanton, fighting for women's suffrage and wrote the Declaration of Sentiments. She was a fighter for women's rights and gave women a voice in politics. So very nice with a trailblazer there. Wow, yeah. And John says, Sophie Scholl never ceased to amaze me since the day I first read about her. I will always admire her as long as I live. She was the true paradigm of courage in a world where the humanity was replaced by pure brutality. Now, I had to Google her, but she was an anti-Nazi activist during Nazi Germany. So definitely an inspirational woman there. And finally, Mr. Chu Tien says that Marie Curie dedicated her life to research and changed the course of science. Not many have won 2 Nobel Prizes, and she made the ultimate sacrifice when she lost her life to radiation poisoning.
Wow.
So, what a legend.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Magnus, he does make his move.
Magnus makes his move, a very sensible one. He just brings his rook across, defending a weak pawn. So black's bishop trying to attack some pawns. At the moment, everything's protected by white. And there is one trick in the position that DUBOV maybe was counting on, maybe he was banking on one specific idea for black, but Magnus has seen further into the future. And if we can bring up the analysis board, but keeping an eye on the players, because we might see DUBOV looking maybe disappointed soon, because after this last move by Magnus, bringing the rook across, defending this pawn, I think DUBOV's idea was to bring his rook across, attacking the white queen. It looks like this white queen can no longer defend the knight, and that's true. The white queen is forced to a different square, but after the queen brings herself to this square, the white knight drops off. Everything is hanging together by a thread for black. The queen defending this rook, the queen also defending this bishop, and the queen is actually overworked. So all you need to do is give her a little nudge. Just push your pawn forward, kick the queen off this square, and the queen can no longer defend both the rook and the bishop. So white would actually temporarily sacrifice a knight, but next move, he's going to win one of those two pieces. And this must be what Dubov has missed. Actually, once this happens, for example, the queen goes back to defend the rook. After queen takes pawn, do a quick count. Queen takes bishop, sorry, do a quick count. White is going to be at least a couple of pawns up. At least 2 pawns up. This pawn also dropping off as well. So right now, Dubov in huge trouble. Magnus finding this key move, bringing his rook across, and the tricks work in white's favor. That's a big problem for Dubov.
Yeah. And again, a big thing for Daniil Dubov. I mean, what can he aim to do here?
2 pawns down. It's it's hard to make a suggestion, really.
So we have seen in very many games, almost all of the games, with the black king sort of trapped in there. It's always a good idea to move one of the pawns.
Yeah, you read my mind, Kaya. When you asked what should he do, I was thinking probably there's nothing else to do other than push one of those pawns, right? So maybe one of the pawns in front of the black king. I would push Harry the H pawn just because we know we've got Simon Williams coming up next.
Yeah, exactly.
That's his.
I would also push it two squares forward, because why not? You need to create some kind of chaos. You need to create some ghosts on the board to spook Magnus out.
Throw it towards the white king.
Exactly, because ultimately white is winning, and if they play perfectly, well, Magnus will just breeze through.
Yeah.
But okay.
That's Dubov's style as well, right? Just going for the opponent's king. And here, that's probably the only remaining chance. He cannot go for that variation I showed. White's just winning by straightforward, simple means. And if that doesn't work, look for alternatives.
Well, we do know when these two play, odds are it's going to end up with a winner. They keep beating each other, both of them. And right now it's looking good for Magnus Carlsen. Dubov down to 3 minutes on the clock. Will the clocks be a big issue here?
Probably for Dubov more than Magnus right now. Magnus, we've seen actually some of his losses against Dubov. He does lose a lot of time on the clock because he's so worried about his king all the time. But here, white's king is safe for now. So Magnus, he's going to be feeling confident that 3 minutes is enough to convert his advantage of 2 extra pawns. And there's no attack yet. But yeah, for Dubov, he's the one who has to whip up something, create something. And it always takes more time to create something. And yeah, he's below on the clock as well, so not ideal.
And a lot of the games in round 9 have finished. Vidit Aronian, that's a draw, which is good news for Aronian. He's in top of table, sole lead so far, yeah, 6.5 points. Feruzia, it's a draw against Ergaisi. And then Gukesh, the 15-year-old, winning against Huifan. Wesley Sowenting played the draw. Svidler was able to win his game against Adiban. And then 3 games still going on. And we have some moves. Yeah,
we have a couple of moves, and they were the moves I showed earlier.
Yes. And you were quite critical about it. We were like, no, you can't play like that. It's too straightforward. And, well, it's on the board now, so...
It's on the board. I mean,
what can we
it's
say?
The most direct line, but it just makes white's task easier. As we mentioned, black's queen has to move. The bishop or the rook will drop off, most likely. You should keep your rook rather than the bishop.
Right, so maybe he's thinking, okay, I drop my queen back, and then after queen takes bishop, then I can play queen. No, you can't. I have to go queen takes pawn. Why not?
Yep.
And it's on the board. And now when Magnus plays
queen takes pawn as well.
Queen takes pawn. You go. Here we go.
Here we go.
that's how we create chaos.
It sounded very cockney when you said, "Here we go."
Here we go.
Oh yeah.
Apples and pears. Okay, Magnus now trying to kick away that black queen from the centre. Makes a lot of sense. There was a small trick in the position if black had taken a pawn with his queen, but he didn't fall for that. My big fear is that if the queens do come off, and they most likely will at some point, if Magnus is accurate, then white's 2 pawns, or white's 2 connected pawns on the A and B lines, they're going to fly forward.
Right.
And win the game.
I must admit, I always think of those two pawns connected together like school children, holding hands and just marching forward. Because they do it one step at a time, and they always do it together.
It's like when they cross the zebra crossing, right? Black, white, black, white. Yeah. It's like the squares. You hold hands and go up the squares. So yeah, if queens come off, white is just completely winning. Dubov's last chance is some kind of sudden blitz attack against the white king, but Magnus trying to trade the rooks now.
Okay, so I would top off one set of rooks and then just carry on with my pawn. That's my plan.
Makes a lot of sense. Maybe Dubov also could try and keep both sets of rooks on the board. I'm not sure whether that's possible or productive.
That's the thing. I think if to keep both sets of rooks on the board, I might have to lose time. Okay, well,
He does it.
DUBOV does it. He lines up both his rooks against white's weak queenside pawn, but it doesn't. That queenside, the pawn in the center doesn't really matter. It's all about those two past connected pawns that are there on the left. And if Magnus can just swap off queens, it's going to be an impossible task for DUBOV to save the game.
So Magnus using his rook to kick away the black queen, also potentially eyeing up the pawn behind it. So black's queen has to go back to a square that defends that black pawn out there on the right. So nice move by Magnus. Black's queen is going to have to go to a passive. Okay, I was going to say back to a passive square. Instead, she steps forward. What do we think? Can Magnus try and force those queens off somehow? Can you bring the queen back to the starting square? Really insist on that queen trade.
Yes.
Okay, so
I like it. Do it, because it's also nice harmony with the rook and the queen. That they're working together and they're targeting the pawn, the Harry pawn that's just stepped 2 squares forward.
Yeah, I mean that's the first move that would come to my mind. Maybe there's other more materialistic ways to play.
Oh, we want to bank it, put it in the bag, and just get. Okay, Magnus finds it.
And the most human move, I think, just getting rid of any potential risk. If the queens come on, at least you know you won't get checkmated. He's been checkmated too many times by DUBOV, and although the evaluation bar doesn't fully approve, it just keeps a winning advantage, and it removes all risks. So very, very sensible. The black queen, if it moves, the pawn behind it will be captured.
Okay, DUBOV has allowed the exchange of queens, and we now have a double rook ending. I mean,
and you said it, if he allows the queen exchange, then there's very little hope. Is that the situation?
Yeah.
At least he won a pawn back in the process, but black's 3 versus 2 advantage on the right side is pretty much irrelevant. Those 3 will never create a passed pawn against white's 2, but white has these 2 free runners, so yeah, it's very little hope now. And Magnus, that move, I think, is the killer.
That move is so accurate, because the whole point, the only chance that black had in this position is if DUBOV manages to line up the 2 rooks along the second row, then there's some trouble, because, you know, Magnus is saying, yes, you can come forward with your rook to the second line, but immediately I will try and swap off rooks.
Yep, and that's Magnus's goal. He's got a big threat, and he's lined up his 2 rooks together, so he's continuously going to be able to challenge black's rooks wherever they go. And he's threatening to bring his rook up to the top of the board already and get one set of rooks off the board. If one set of rooks leave, then it's definitely game over. It's already almost game over, but it's definitely game over if one set of rooks leave and get traded.
And it doesn't even matter if you actually lose a pawn on the right side and you trade. As long as you trade a set of rooks, that's what counts.
Yeah, and DUBOV, the reason he brought his king to the side is because he didn't want to allow white's rook to come up to the top of the board and pin black's rook against that king. So the king is out of the way now. If white brings the rook up to offer the trade, black will run away. Black's just going to consistently run away from all of those trades. And
wow. All right. Well, another game has actually finished. Artemiev with a win against Salem Saleh. Artemiev is just so impressive, and he's going to face Magnus CARLSEN in the next round, the final round of today. We're going to follow that game, and well, maybe Magnus as well can get a win in round 9.
Yes, it's looking that way. But for DUBOV, don't stop believing. Just keep your rooks on the board. Just hope that Magnus kind of pushes his pawns too quickly, or that he kind of forgets to trade a set of rooks, and then there might be a chance. But okay, DUBOV, meanwhile, going for one of white's pawns. And that's the key. Whichever pawn advances, you attack the pawn that protects it, the furthermost back pawn. That's going to be DUBOV's strategy right now, but Magnus keeping everything together. And, okay, black's rook finally finding that second rank. But it's no real threats right now for DUBOV.
Yeah, I didn't really like what Magnus did, I have to admit, pushing his pawn. Because those 2 pawns were very nice, and they were anchored each other in a great way.
I think he's got a clear plan. He's going to put one of his rooks behind one of his passed pawns, and then he's just going to push it, even if it at the cost of one of those 2 connected pawns.
Okay.
And I think that's his plan, but we will see. I mean, I don't want to guess the world champion's moves. He's the Eckengame expert. I'm just a poor man's version. So.
Okay, so he's going to slide. He's going to slide the rook on the 3rd row, move it 1 square, and then start the push.
I would probably even slide the rook the 1st row, but we will see. Because the thing is, if you slide across the rook on the 1st row, if black goes for your other corner pawn, you'll have to trade a set of rooks anyway, so it makes sense to keep a rook supporting your pawn on the... What I would do, I would move my rook across one square and support the B pawn, basically, on that B line.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. Use a rook. Rooks belong behind past pawns, whether you're attacking or defending. So I think that would be the best way to support it. But Magnus, under 1 minute, maybe getting slightly nervous.
And I mean, you've been very excited about his position. The bar hasn't been like, ooh, this is a win, you know. It's on his side, but it's not super excited.
No, it's not game over yet, for sure. Dubov, actually, over the last few moves, he's put up a good fight. And he's definitely trying his hardest to make this awkward for Magnus to convert.
And now, under 30 seconds for Magnus Carlsen. I did ask you if the clock would be an issue for Daniil Dubov. Now I'm wondering if it's going to be a big issue for Magnus Carlsen. 18 seconds.
It is okay, he plays the move that I was thinking about, and now I'm expecting to see the black rook attack one of the pawns.
Yeah, actually, I think... Yeah. I'm trying to work out what the black's best bet is, but I think you're right. Maybe just go after one of white's pawns or try and line up your rooks on the second rank again, but that feels slow.
It does feel very slow, especially with the white rook on the third row guarding any pawn advances. So, you know, my hope was perhaps that white would kind of be fixated on holding those two pawns together.
Sometimes you're better off alone. Sometimes you just want to give up one pawn and let one pawn run on its own. So we'll see. What will Dubov do to try and slow down the advance of those white pawns? It's looking very difficult. Again, although the engine says +1, it feels like it could be +10 if black isn't accurate at defending this one.
Yeah, if I were Dubov, I would just move my rook. That would be my instant choice. Move my rook on the second row, move it to the edge to attack the pawn, and just try to initiate some kind of complications, because you never know. White might choose the wrong kind of idea. Like, I can see some danger, for instance, if white is adamant to keep those two pawns on the board. You know, suddenly there might be some crafty mating nets in the air.
True.
Mating nets.
Yeah. Okay. So actually, okay. Magnus is killing the game. So the mating net that I saw was basically involving. It was very ambitious, but it was all to do with the fact that the white king is stuck in the back rank, and maybe there's a possibility of advancing your pawns and keeping the king caged in.
Okay. So black's trying to go active. Black's trying to use both of his rooks on this second rank.
And now the bar is getting excited.
Now finally the bar's getting excited. Maybe black just had to grit his teeth and take white's corner pawn there, and just hope for the best and pray that he was able to save that game and stop white's remaining pawn.
It was the only chance.
It was the only chance. But this way, it feels like he's just...
Okay, but this is a little bit sneaky, right? So, I mean, the whole concept is that after pawn takes pawn, well, that could be a mistake because of the rook coming down, and the two rooks would align themselves on the second row, and the white king would be in danger.
Okay, so Magnus actually with just over 10 seconds now.
It's going down.
Critical moment. Is there more than one winning move? I'm not so sure anymore. He does take that pawn off. Maybe it was better to actually ignore that pawn. That pawn wasn't actually going anywhere, so suddenly Magnus's advantage slightly disappearing, and that is because black's rook now can get behind. If you look at the pawn on the B line, the very far advanced white pawn, black's rook finally can get behind it and maybe try and pick it off.
Look at the clock. Okay.
He made that with 1 second to spare.
Wow.
Gosh, keeping us on the edge of our seats. So, okay, now if I were Magnus, I would just simply hold on to that pawn.
He goes active instead.
He goes active instead, okay. Still a nice idea.
Yep, a nice idea there by Magnus.
1 second. Did he make a move?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
2 seconds to spare.
But now Magnus is about to gobble up a second pawn and 2-pawn advantage. Yes, he's lost his far advanced pass pawn, but he's going to get an extra pawn on both sides of the board. This should be winning for Magnus. Okay, now he swaps off a set of rooks, and that is game over. We mentioned as soon as one set of rooks come off the board, black has no more counterplay, no more attack against the white king. And all Magnus needs to do, trade that set of rooks, protect your pawn in the corner there, and slowly but surely you'll create 2 passed pawns, and those will overwhelm black's army.
Right, exactly. And the pawn that's there on the left is kind of more or less the decoy that's going to just tie the black rook down, and there's just really nothing to be done here. And Magnus pushing his pawn forward.
Yep.
There's nothing, you know what to do. Rook takes rook, king takes, and now black. The only thing black can do is just wait.
Yeah, and there is a saying that all rook endgames are drawn. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek, but not all rook endgames are a draw. Not when you're 2 pawns up. when they're two healthy pawns as they are here. And there we go, Magnus just taking kind of baby steps, just stepping one square forward with his pawn. Next he'll centralize the white king. And yeah, Dubov, I'm impressed he's playing on. That shows optimism. But yeah, Magnus, he's, again, the endgame king. He's not going to let this one slip. And, okay.
Yeah, it looks like Dubov is about to give up.
Yeah, he knows that it's inevitable. He can slow things down, but the result is not going to change. White's slowly going to step forward with his pawn. There we go. Black's rook will be tied down, stopping that pawn, and then White will make a pass pawn on the other side, and that will be the final straw that breaks the camel's back.
Yeah. Dubov thinking, is there anything he can do to trick Magnus? I guess that's not it.
Nope, unfortunately not. He's trying to trade a set of pawns. He's hoping for some stalemates. He's going to try and trap his own black king and hope that Magnus walks into some tricky stalemate there. That was very very cunning. But Magnus, he actually brought his rook up, releasing squares for the black king.
Right, exactly. And it's like that Hall and Oates song. Like, I can't go for that. No can do. So yeah, very nice. And we have a result. Magnus Carlsen wins against Daniil Dubov.
Yeah, he gives up Daniil Dubov. A great game by Magnus Carlsen and a great win for him against Daniil Dubov.